This card's probably going to be causing quite a lot of havoc in the new standard format. It's Vikavolt V. Welcome back everyone to more from the Sableyes. I'm Mitch and today we're going to take a look at a Vikavolt V list. This is a post-standard rotation list, so please don't expect this one to be as good as some of the lists that were coming out of Japan. Obviously, cards like Electro Power and Thunder Mountain being legal in those formats make this deck way better, and if you're looking for a list for the POG Championships, this one probably isn't going to be for you. Instead, we are looking at a Darkness Ablaze format Vikavolt list. This deck is a really solid. It's obviously not quite as powerful as it could have been if we had access to Lost Thunder cards, but is still very frustrating to play against and is definitely worth considering for the new upcoming standard format. Before we take a look at the list, we'll just quickly do a couple of plugs. Please, if you haven't already, consider subscribing. Click the button down below. It only takes a second. You can always unsubscribe if you'd like, and whilst you're down there, give this video a like so that more people on YouTube get the opportunity to see it. We'll jump straight into the list now and show you exactly how Vikavolt V is going to work. So Vikavolt is a very interesting card with some very interesting text that we can include in the list. And this is the one that we have put together for our testing at the moment. There's obviously lots of changes that could happen, but this at the moment does seem to be faring pretty well, and obviously Vikavolt is the key. With Paralyzing Bolt, Lightning, and Colorless, 50 damage isn't that huge amount, it's not a massive deal, but the ability to turn off your opponent's item cards, make it so that they cannot use them, and frustrate them is going to be absolutely critical. We're going to try and pair that with a couple of other quite frustrating cards that could potentially set us up to win some games. But Vikavolt is the key. Worst case scenario, you can always get a big kind of 190 damage off with an extra energy if you need to, and that's the joy of this card, right? It's not like a constant 50 damage like some of our previous item lock cards have been. This Vikavolt has the opportunity to take knockouts, which other decks haven't realistically been able to do as easily. So Vikavolt with 210 HP, very strong, but obviously not the only Pokemon that we're going to be looking at. We've got a bunch of them in the list, but we'll start off at the top here with 3 Jirachis. It could potentially be like a 3 Jirachi, a 4 Jirachi, 3 Vikavolt line. At the moment, we've got a 4 Vikavolt line and a 3 Jirachi line, just to test out what that is going to look like. But obviously, Stellar Wish is such a powerful ability that you would love to be able to get that into your starting position. We have lots of other tech basic Pokemon, I guess you could call them, that are going to get in the way of our starting spot. So if we could start with Jirachi or Vikavolt V, either way, we don't really mind as long as we get one of those into the active. I think Jirachi would probably be better, but we do want to make sure that we have access to 4 Vikavolt. So if that's the only space that we're playing around with in this list, then we've probably got ourselves a pretty solid deck. Obviously, the rest of these tech Pokemon are all for specific things. This Absol, I'm not 100% sold on Absol as a card. We've got it in at the moment because obviously it is very frustrating in a deck that does rely on a lot of energy denial and frustrating your opponent out of the game. And sometimes Absol can just be enough to get you across the line, but I'm not sure how useful it's going to be. This is probably one of the cards that is on the chopping block for me. But the rest of these techs are very strong. We've got Tapu Koko Prism with Dance of the Ancients, one of the few Prism Star cards that remain in the format. And the best thing about it is it's going to help us power up our Vikavolt Vs very quickly. Obviously, a 2 energy attack cost can cause some problems, but with Tapu Koko as well as the new Turbo Patch, we should be able to get our Vikavolts firing pretty quickly and consistently, which has been a big problem for 2 energy attackers up until the start of this format. So Tapu Koko will help us out. It's a shame that it's the only electric support that remains from that kind of Pikarom deck that has been so successful, but Electro Power and Thunder Mountain in this deck would make Vikavolt absolutely busted. So probably not a bad idea to get rid of it. We do have one copy of Dedenne in the deck. You could potentially play with Crobat, but Dedenne seems to be the best option at the moment. You do want to draw through your deck and try and find those cards as quickly as possible. And you don't really mind if you discard things. Obviously, Lightning Energy you can discard and get back with Turbo Patch. And Supporters, even though we've got some small counts, can always be grabbed back with Mewtwo. Mind Report is a very powerful ability. And when we've got that in combination with Scoop Up Net, which we also play, we can potentially find ourselves Supporters exactly when we need them. Now, we've got the last two basic Pokemon in this deck. They are cards that we've always kind of seen in combination with Scoop Up Net. Galarian Zigzagoon, that Headbutt Tantrum ability is very, very strong, can potentially set up some nice numbers for you. 2 Zigzagoons will mean that a Super Zap Cannon is capable of knocking out other Vikavolts, which could potentially be relevant, but obviously it's not necessarily going to be the #1 use for it. Just setting up knockouts on 60 or 70 HP basics and taking knockouts with Paralyzing Bolt is probably going to be the main way you'll use that Zigzagoon, but it's really, really flexible. Gives you a lot of opportunities to take some knockouts that maybe would be out of reach otherwise, and also a Dimension Breach Giratina, which I think becomes much stronger in this format because there are so many more special energy that are really, really powerful. We've got the new Fire Energy, the new Normal Energy, we've got the new Dark Energy for Eternatus, we've got Twin Energy, and Speed Lightning, and Horror Psychic. So many special energy that are doing really, really well, or are expected to do well. So Dimension Breach Giratina, being able to discard that simply by playing down a Pokemon, can sometimes provide you that little bit of a boost that you need to get across the line. So very, very good Pokemon card here. Like I mentioned, the Jirachi line could be thickened up, the Absol could go out. There are always other things that you can include, so don't feel locked into this Pokemon line. This is just the one that we've been testing out so far, and it seems to be working pretty well, especially since the supporter line in this deck is super, super consistent. We've got 4 Professor's Research, which is obviously quite useful. Discard, draw 7. There's 2 Marnie in here as well. It's one of our only disruption options, Marnie, as well as obviously the 1 reset stamp. But we've actually opted to go for 1 copy of Erica's Hospitality in this deck. And the reason for that is Eternatus has so many Pokemon on this field that you're going to potentially be able to draw a lot of cards with Erica's. This is probably one that you should be looking into getting if you haven't got copies of it. It's one of those cards that's a little bit older now, but definitely worth pursuing. Erica's is going to be a very powerful supporter in the Darkness Ablaze format if, like we expect, Eternatus does do really, really well. We also have Boss's Order. We've got 2 of these Boss's Orders cards here. It's going to be our Gust. We're not necessarily gusting up Pokemon to try and take knockouts in this deck. Instead, we're trying to gust up Pokemon that we don't think our opponent can get out of the active. And at the moment, when people are playing Switch and Scoop Up Net as their only options to get out of the active, then that can potentially lock your opponent into an unfortunate situation for a long period of time. So that can be super useful. Then even if we do want to use them to take a knockout, we can always get them back with Mewtwo as well. And finally, our last supporter card in this deck, a little bit more energy disruption. It is Team Yell Grunt. This is going to stop your opponent from getting momentum with their Pokemon. They're not going to be able to get an attachment every turn, guaranteed, when we have Team Yell Grunt in the deck. So we can always remove one of the energies. Even if it does go back to our opponent's hand, that's better than have it attached to one of the Pokemon in play. And potentially if we gust up something that has an awkward retreat cost, maybe a Mewtwo or maybe even a Vikavolt V from our opponent, then Team Yell Grunt is going to stop them from retreating and getting out of our Paralyzing Bolt lock. So a very strong supporter, and again, we can get it back with Mewtwo as well. So very, very powerful here. Our item cards, we've got a few 4-ofs in the middle here, and then a few other tech options down the side. Obviously, Quick Ball is non-negotiable at the moment, same as Scoop Up Net and Switch. All 3 of these cards are 4-ofs guaranteed. They are so, so powerful, and because they're so powerful, it means that our deck has a really good chance of being successful. Because almost every deck that we've featured so far has had an engine that is built around these 3 cards. And if you can't play any of them, then your opponent's probably going to struggle. We also have 4 copies of Crushing Hammer in this list. I know coin flips are not necessarily something that you want to be relying on, but in a deck where you're trying to lock your opponent out of the game by reducing their item usage, then you probably want to stop them from having energy as well. The thing that's going to lose us the game is our opponent being able to knock out multiple Vikavolts. So Crushing Hammer, even if we only get 2 of 4 of these, then we'll at least be in front. I'd even accept a 1 ultimately. If I played all 4 Crushing Hammers and only got 1, then that would be acceptable, because at least it slowed down our opponent a little bit. Obviously, though, you do risk getting 0. That's what 50-50 coin flips are all about. And talking of coin flips, let's flip some more. The new Turbo Patch is a really, really cool card that lets Vikavolt potentially attack the turn that it comes into play. If we flip heads, then we get a basic energy card from our discard pile and attach it to one of our basic Pokemon, as long as they aren't a GX. So we can attach an energy, one of our 8 electric energies, to any of the Pokemon that we have in our list, apart from the Dene. So we're probably going to put them on Vikavolt, just throwing it out there. So we can potentially power up a Paralyzing Bolt straight away with a single attachment and a heads flip on Turbo Patch. We could even get a Super Zap Cannon if we are incredibly lucky. So definitely worth taking a look at. Turbo Patch we haven't really focused on yet, but we've got a couple more decks that will be coming up in the next couple of days that will have it in it. So definitely a cool card. I really like it. It's weird that I like this coin flip, but I don't like this coin flip. I think this one is because if you flip tails, then you lose. So it's not like if you flip heads, your opponent loses. That's kind of cruel and unfair, but that's okay. I like Turbo Patch. I think it's pretty fun, and I'm looking forward to flipping lots of coins with this card when we get PTCGO back up and running. We've also got a 3 count of Giant Bomb in the top here. We've got this item because it is really, really difficult to win a game if your opponent is knocking out your Vikavolts in one shot. And we know there are a couple of Pokemon around at the moment that can deal 210 damage. Things like Zacian, things like Eternatus VMAX, very easily going to be able to get those knockouts. And if they do decide to knock out our Vikavolt in one shot, then they are accepting that they are going to be taking 10 damage themselves. So if they deal over 180 damage, then the Giant Bomb goes off. Our opponent takes 10 damage counters, and that can potentially put them in range of being knocked out by a Super Zap Cannon from us. So that is a really, really cool inclusion. I think it's pretty situational, but obviously when your opponent is putting on a lot of pressure, this card can sometimes get you back into the game, which is all that you really are looking for. I mentioned the reset stamp before. We've got 1 copy here. Not necessary, but obviously if you get your opponent into a position where they're way out in front, stamp them to 1 and then lock them with items, you can sometimes just give yourself enough time to get across the line, and that can be very, very useful. So definitely a good card to include, as is this one, Wondrous Labyrinth. It's our only stadium, and you might ask, well, why not a fairy type? So why would we use this stadium? It's kind of for the same reason that Center Scorch uses it. We can very easily get 3 energy attached to our Vikavolt, but it's not going to be easy for something like Eternatus to get 3 energy attached to a VMAX, especially when we're playing 10 Yellgrunt, Giratina, and 4 Crushing Hammer. So we're going to be able to reduce the energy available to our opponent, and hopefully Wondrous Labyrinth means that they're not going to be able to attack when they would like to. So as long as we can get 3 energy onto a Vikavolt, Wonder Lab is going to be a really powerful stadium. Definitely one to be ready to counter if you are going up against Vikavolt V decks, or even like Center Scorch and stuff. Like this card is really, really good, so keep an eye out for it. Onto the energy now. We obviously have 8 electric energy up here in the top right hand corner of the screen. We want to have quite a few of them. Obviously Tapu Koko needs to have them in the discard pile. Turbo Patch needs to have them in the discard pile. So we want to make sure we've got access to them early. 8 is probably a pretty solid number. We also have 3 copies of Speed Lightning Energy down in the bottom right hand corner here. Obviously Speed Lightning Energy not quite as useful when it comes to these other cards, but can still draw, so you want to have access to it. We've got 3 here because we've fit in 1 copy of Capture Energy. I'm not sure about Capture Energy. I like it, but obviously it's not super useful all the time. It is really, really good though to help you find Tapu Koko Prism Star, which is sometimes all that you need to get an attack off. If you've got a Vikavolt in play, maybe you've got a Jirachi in the active, you can play down the Capture Energy, attach it to the Vikavolt, get yourself Tapu Koko, and then attach a discarded Lightning Energy onto that onto that Vikavolt to start attacking. So it is super useful. Only a one-off because we don't want to take the place of too many Speed Lightnings. Obviously that card's really, really strong, but it is definitely worthy of an inclusion. So that's our 60 cards of Vikavolt. Again, if you have any suggestions or any modifications that you would make to this list, feel free to do it. This is just a starting point. It is a 60 cards that we think will get the job done, so definitely worth testing it. You can always test it on our particular table if you wish. You can jump across to our testing space. There is a link in the description to do just that. So if you're looking to really annoy your friends in your pre-Darkness Ablaze testing, or if you want to get some free wins on the ladder, because this one will probably do the job for you, then you might consider Vikavolt V. It is an incredibly good card, and I'm definitely expecting it to do quite well at some point, whether it's in the POG Championships or whether it is in fact, the new standard format post-Darkness Ablaze. Very, very good list. Test it out on Tabletop Simulator before the cards are released, and have fun. That's the key, right? Have fun by making your opponent not play the game. It's always a good tip. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along and checking this one out. If you like the content and you want to subscribe, then consider doing that. Click the button that is on top of the Sableye right now. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have some videos that YouTube thinks you'll like, and at the bottom right-hand corner, a playlist for more Darkness Ablaze testing on Tabletop Simulator. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming along, and we'll see you next time. More from the Sableyes.